Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks and you're checking out a mixing tip and trick tutorial video on ADSR. So in this video, it's going to be a little bit of a discussion-oriented video plus the tip and trick. And it's going to be centered around high passing and if you're doing it too much and when's the right time to do it. And then we're going to look at a cool tip and trick I like to use sometimes when the mix kind of calls for it. All right, so high passing is something that I feel like people overdo. This video came about because I recently came across an article about like 15 mixing tips and tricks, and one of them was like high pass everything that's not a bass and a kick or a sub, and I'm like, but like why? And then some people think that high passing starts at like 100 hertz and down. Some people think it's only the sub. Some articles or some resources will actually say which frequencies it's to cut from and kind of leave out the context of the instrument. And then the second thing that made me want to make this video was I very seldom do mixes for other people, but someone had a project for mixing and it was a good fit. And they sent me their session because they're a Logic user and they had a high pass on literally like everything. And they had like pianos and a couple like bass, like electric basses and that sort of stuff. And it was just, there was no low end in their mix except for the sub and kick, but the sub is lower than the low end, right? So that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this. If you are finding yourself high passing everything, I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but just think about why you're high passing or cutting out low frequencies from an element in the mix. And then definitely think long and hard about what frequencies you are cutting. If you are cutting them, think about why you're removing them. How is it making the mix better? Is it actually adding impact to the mix? Is it adding to the emotional weight of the song? Those things become really important when you're mixing. And I think for a lot of us, I know I did this a few years ago, I got too technical with mixing. I'd be like, okay, I have to do this. I have to take out this frequency from a kick, otherwise my song is going to be shit. And I probably ruined like, I don't know, 5 songs, 6 songs doing that type of having that mentality. Because if you're mixing, if you've ever mixed with a client in the room and you do something really cool, and you're like wanting them to pat your back and then you ask them about it, they'll be like, I didn't even hear it. Like they're hearing the whole pie, right? They're not hearing like different ingredients of the pie. They're hearing everything, right? Which equates to emotional vibe and energy. So when you're when you're high passing or taking out or cutting out lows, you want to make sure you're doing it for a reason. So we're going to look at an example in this video. I have this electric guitar track right here. And we're going to take off any EQ that is on it. And I have a couple drums up here. And we have a couple like rhythm guitars down here. So it's a really basic instrumentation on purpose. There's no bass. So let's check it out. All right, so that's something that if you're thinking about it from like the context of some of these articles that I read, you should be opening up an EQ and you should be cutting out or high passing a good amount of frequencies. Now, it really depends how much you cut. So with this specific guitar, for instance, if I was looking at this, I would load up an EQ and I'd load up an analyzer and I'd see if there's any like sub frequencies in this instrument. Because a guitar naturally should not have sub frequencies, right? Like there shouldn't be so much low-end content like from 50 hertz down. It just shouldn't happen. If it is there, it's probably hum, room hum, amp hum, that sort of thing. Now that can be removed. Now that doesn't need to be removed on every track. And I know a lot of people might disagree with that, but there are some instances where you may want stylistically a little bit more boominess to a sound, and that's fine. But cleaning up and doing subtractive EQ to clean up a sound, like if there's low-end hum or you record a vocalist and there's room noise or air conditioning or heater or something like that, then yes, it makes perfect sense. But with this guitar, there's nothing under 100 hertz or maybe 95, right? So if I were to do something like this, where you're taking out some of the frequencies, or if I were to do a harder Q cut like this, I'm removing some frequencies that I might actually want there in context of the mix. Now, in this mix, if this was a verse, I don't think I want a bass right here, right? Because I want my song to grow. So this is a good example of when you don't want to high pass too much. You want to just clean up, but then you don't want to remove all the low frequencies. Well, there's a way, and here comes the tip and trick part of this tutorial, that you can actually clean up these low frequencies and kind of create like a pseudo bass. And I like doing this all the time. And this isn't for all you guys out there who see this and are kind of like, well, that's not like proper to do. Well, I've gotten really cool results with it, so I thought I would pass it on. So what I like to do in this element, in this instrument, or this instance where it's maybe like a piano or a guitar or a synth where I want a little bit of low end, but I want to have complete control over the low end of that synth or that instrument, whatever it may be. This is what I'll do. I'll listen to the track. I'll kind of find where the bass exists. So this is about 100 to 200, right? So what I'm going to do is roll off everything to about, I don't know, 156 hertz, 160 in this instance. And some of you guys might think that I should just be using mid-side EQ, but I'll tell you why I'm not doing that in a second. So what I'm going to do is keep this on stereo. Right, if I do mid only, listen to this. It's not a huge difference because it's a guitar, right? So I could do mid on this example where I'm taking out these low frequencies in the mid-range only, but I don't know if I want a lot of low-end frequency on my left and right channels out wide, so we'll keep it on stereo for this. So then what I do is I duplicate that source, right? In this instance, it's this guitar, and here it is right under it. Same thing. Then what I do is I open up another EQ, and I do a low pass, and I do kind of a mix of a low pass and a high pass. I'm taking out all these high-end frequencies here, right? And this right here is going to about 160 hertz. And if we look at the EQ on the first channel of the guitar, it's going to about 156 hertz. So there's a little bit of a crossover frequency, and I'll adjust that as need be. And then what I do is on this, I still have, because there's a preset here that I tweaked, that I saved, I still have this 50 hertz and down thing. I don't really need that because I already know there's no sub frequency in this track. So here's what we have on this second track of the guitar. Right? It sounds like kind of like a distorted sub bass, doesn't it? Now, this is why I like doing this as opposed to mid-side EQ and as opposed to triggering a sine wave from a synth. And I have that down here, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's because in this example, like with a guitar or a piano or something like that, do you hear this slide that I do from the second chord up? First chord to second chord? Hear that? If I just triggered a sub bass like down here, what I'd have to do is I'd have to just kind of cut that out. Right, let me pitch this up because that's too low for this right now. So, right, like I just would have to let it stop. Which could work, and it's very, it's pretty clean. But in this song, in this track, I liked the stylistic kind of vibe of using this method here. So now, the reason I like separating this is there's three reasons. First, I can completely control the EQ and the volume of this and blend back with the original sound to taste. Second, I made this a monophonic track. So if I open up a multimeter here in Logic and look at my phase correlation, the low end of my mix now is mono, so it's mono compatible, right? Now that's nice because there's obviously with this guitar, if we take this off, you can hear reverb and slight delay, right? So I don't want that in the low end of the mix. So what I've done is I've essentially created like a bass instrument from this one electric guitar, and now I can blend them to taste. Right, so if I turn off the second guitar and I turn off the EQ on the first one, it doesn't sound that much different, right? If we kind of A-B here. It's just quieter because I have control. So that's why sometimes I do like using this method, and we can actually layer in a proper sub, like a bass that's tuned down in the sub range into this if our mix needed it or we wanted it stylistically. right? So it really depends. That's kind of up to you. But these are some good examples of why I think we kind of touched on, obviously, why you shouldn't just high pass everything to a certain frequency. It should always be in context of the mix. And then sometimes you can get a little bit creative with this and do some interesting things. So with this specific section of the song here, what I've done is basically I've taken out all of the frequencies like above 80, or I'm sorry, below 80 hertz. And except for the kick and this guitar bass we made, that is mono, everything else is pretty much cut. So that really helps make the kick stand out without having to over compress it and get it really loud in the mix. And I know this a little bit outside the scope of this video, but what you could do with this bass element that we created, you could load up a multi-band compressor and sidechain it to your kick and have it duck out the frequencies where the kick is kind of snapping through on the higher end of the kick to get even more room. But that's for a different video. All right, guys, if you have any questions or comments, let me know below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.